Glad to be here and hopefully inspire you a bit from the Nordic market, how to serve some untapped potential in the digital area and to approach some underserved segments and new revenue streams in general. Just a big background, because I think you haven't heard of Telness before. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. We are both an MVNO in the Swedish market, targeting the SME with a digital offering specifically. We are also, alongside with that, we have a software company, Telness Tech, that have an automated digital telco platform with a bunch of other MVNOs and service providers that use our technology. First of all, there are some forces disrupting telecom, in my opinion. The customer experience and the demands from end users are changing quite rapidly, getting inspired from other industries. And I think we talked about here before also, there's a need for faster innovation and go-to-market and a flexibility in technology to actually serve demands that are changing rapidly. And the last point is that it's not a new technology enabling a lot of automation. And it's a game of losing OpEx. I think that's basically it. I think the winners will be the one that doesn't focus on infrastructure in its own, but to start focus on the actual value for the end users and how to bring the customers in focus when you drive technology for change. I have a background as an engineer. Just to give a big background there, I worked at Telenor, both in Sweden and in Telenor Group before. There I was part of a number of these huge digital transformation projects, trying to change the complete IT stack and environment to reduce OpEx, to be able to get rid of legacy, to be faster in go-to-market, and just reduce a lot of the problems the customers had in the end. Unfortunately, very, very failed projects. I think you're familiar with some of them in your organizations also, but they also came with a lot of learnings. And I think my key takeaways is that technology is one thing, and the telecom industry knows that pretty well, but is as much about how you drive change in culture, how you drive change in customer-driven innovation, and how you actually think different in how to not only build stuff, but in terms of architecture and in languages and innovation in its own, that's not only inspired by the telecom industry. I was also part of launching a number of digital attacker brands or sub-brands. That's a quite common strategy to approach the more digital space out there. Obviously, it's a way to target niche segments, to approach the low price segments in markets, not to go with that in the main brand. But what we've seen quite recently when we talk with a lot of MNOs out there is that they're not only focused because they want to target that segment or that anymore, it's because they want to learn how to serve a younger and more digital segment and customer offering, both internally operations in the end offering, because that's going to be the full future. So to do that now and not wait until the 3 or 5 years when the digital transformation is done is one of the key triggers out there right now. And that means a quite different approach in how to do the brand in the organization and how to test out partners and relationship in a small scale. There's a thing here where you try new things, you maybe launch new brands or you test out new products or partners, and that's that you don't have to focus on the same thing that everyone else. One thing that hasn't been approached before, and that's, well, it's going to be most of my presentation, is that the SME segment is a segment that previously haven't really been focused on because it's been too expensive, basically. The B2B is one thing, but obviously you choose to focus on a 300 employee or 1,000 employee company when you have manual operations and key account management in sales, etc., because it's much more efficient to do the same thing for 500 people employee company than for 5. And it's just haven't really been a profitable segment, even though high ARPU, because it's 2 manual operations, so how to serve them. My bet when I launched, or when we launched and founded Telness in 2016 was that this segment now is ready to have a digital offering at the same way as you do a digital challenger brand for consumer. Because if you do a digital and automate offer, then all of a sudden it's a high ARPU segment, but you don't have to have the manual operations. That was the hinder before. Our focus then was to do a niched offering for only the SME, not B2B in general, but to really be focused there, to have a digital offering with automated, the full automated customer journey, also to differentiate in the market, and then obviously to build technology or to use technology to have the automated funnel in the end. Some learnings on how it went. For one, this customer segment is actually willing and ready to buy online. Obviously, it was a bet, but we have now 100% sell online. We have one salesperson that do some of the inbound when we get inbound leads from larger clients, but otherwise they do full online sales without any touch point from our side. The other part is that they're also ready and are preferring self-service if it's simple enough to actually use, which means that they can do the full onboarding and all the changes in an admin portal and actually prefer to do it themselves. The last part is just an interesting learning is that the customer actually do as many changes in the portal and have as many errands, so to say, as the traditional SME customer in Sweden. Like the average of first year of a customer are in contact with the operator about 5 times to have different errands. We have the same, but 4 out of those 5 are changes in the portal, which means that we've reduced the number of support errands with about 80% in terms of a traditional telco, which obviously is quite a nice business case. One thing that we were a bit worried about was how is this going to affect the customer experience? Because I think most of you are aware of that being in contact with a salesperson or a customer support, that's actually one of the triggers to have a higher NPS. Customers are more happy when they talk to a person and get good support. But when you only have a digital experience, will they still be happy? Would you still enable a personal experience for them to appreciate you? And I think this is one thing we've been very proud of, that we have had the happiest scores in Sweden since launch, even though it's a full digital experience. And I think this is a lot triggered by how you expect experiences to be from other industries, where other services like Spotify or Netflix or whatever, it's not like you think of contacting them. It's so simple, so you don't have the problem not to be able to contact them because it's a seamless experience. One of the key factors here has been to try to do things differently, because obviously we're an MVNO in Sweden. There's a lot of pros and cons with being a small player in the telecom market. This has been in our office and on my wall back home. If you think you're too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito in your bedroom. And I think it's quite a nice quote in terms of today's environment, because it is an environment with rapid change and it's going to be a lot of upcomers comparing to the fintech industries, etc. And I think the customers are quite willing to jump on to new experience if their alternatives are there. What we have been focusing on though is where are our benefits when we're a challenger and when we're our mosquito, and try to really put our focus there and to do stuff that MNOs or large players can't. Because obviously there's a lot of benefits of being a large player also. So where we have been focused on is, for once, our branding has been a big part, where we can be a challenger in the market. We can be more personal in our marketing in general, because people actually are interested in what we're doing, which is like a benefit of being a tech company or a startup in general. The second part is using the benefits of not having a huge customer base already. We could launch services without binding periods from start. We could, for example, change the standard offering in Sweden is to have 1, 2, 3, 6 months of free trial. Instead, we launched a customer satisfaction guarantee that is live throughout the life cycle, because we could have happy customers to start with and didn't risk to lose our entire customer base if we open up to leave and get the money back. And those things have been a way for us to spend our money right and also to differentiate in the market. Another thing we've done is, no, I can do this. Some other things we've done is that we tried to use the benefits of being a fast mover and have innovative technology and be fast in go-to-market. We were, for example, the first one to actually be able to sell online in the B2B space in 2017. Otherwise, you needed to contact a salesperson, and it was only the consumer side you can purchase online. We were also the first one actually in the market that did not have binding periods in the B2B space. So just try to differentiate on the stuff that just wasn't there in the market to impact in the end. I will deep dive a little bit more into the SME market, because I think there are a lot of unserved, this is an unserved segment in most markets when we look now across Europe, and this is also where we get the most dialogues with both MVNOs that see this now and MNOs that are trying to launch challenger brands, etc. But there are it's a little bit of a different segment than just something in between consumer and enterprise. So first of all, this segment is about 50% as the consumer segment. The behaviors are similar, and about 50% is quite similar to enterprise. But that leaves this segment to be a thing in its own. So it's not about doing, I think it really, really needs to be treated as a third segment and not a B2B in general. This is also since we launched in 2017, in the Nordics now, it's not only one player in the B2B era. It's actually quite a lot of both challenger brands and MVNOs that has launched specifically for B2B the last 5 years, I would say, and are growing quite rapidly and taking market share. We're serving some of them in our platform. And I think also the latest, I'm not sure if you're following the McKinsey's B2B polls that comes out every year, where they're comparing the success, like the winners in each market, and the one that gains market share towards the rest. And one of the outputs there was that the operators that did focus on the SME and did an omni-channel experience, including digital sales, they were one of the winners. And what's interesting here, I think 2 takeaways is, for one, they talked about the pandemic triggering the digital maturity, basically. And when you hear it, it's quite obvious, but it's here now. And the second one is that now we're no longer in Sweden, we're no longer in the Nordics, this is a global survey. So most markets are ready for the SME to purchase online and a possibility to differentiate with a digital offering for the segment. Our biggest challenge targeting the SME has though been that there was no technology to serve them. When we first launched, we thought we're going to have a great architecture and we're going to use enablers and we're going to use other technology and just to utilize them in a clever way. It's not that many other B2B services that have digital sales, which meant that we basically couldn't deliver on our expectations, and we had to have manual operations in the back end, even though we had online sales in front end, and this didn't scale. So it ended up with us building a lot more technology than thought. It though ended up with Telness Tech in the end, so we decided to take quite a huge investment and build up a company in parallel to approach an automated funnel for the B2B segment in general, where now we're helping then other sub-brands or challenger brands to launch, both B2B and B2C, because many want the same. Or we have a number of MVNOs or actually also MVNEs that complement with our B2B offering. I'm clicking through this. And what's then different with SME? Because obviously there's technology for telecom already, but what's different for SME and what's different when I talk about the digital experience for SME? We started out by designing about 200 plus customer journeys. Obviously there's a lot of more than 200 in an operator in terms of customer journeys, but we prioritized the ones that were with the most volume. So where did more or less all customer go through? The second one was which journeys were very, very critical. Maybe not everyone experienced them, but it's a critical situation for the end customer, and then it needs to be really, really good. Or the last one then, where can we differentiate in our brand? Is there some journeys that we also can talk about in marketing and to differentiate to actually prove our experience in the end? One example of how to optimize and just to how can a journey be different than in terms of the traditional way or the digital one? You can take the PBX example, for example, where you buy a fixed number, and the traditional way is to have a key account manager to sell the PBX number, and then you have to have manual operations to activate and to configure and do the setup for the end user. When I worked at Telenor, I was responsible for the SME market for a while. Then I had a team doing this, and we calculated that it took about 60 minutes per customer to onboard them in my fulfillment department. And that left it with a couple of weeks of delivery time for the end user. And obviously quite expensive then to serve small clients. When we have automated the journey, now the customer basically buy the number online, as you're used to in the consumer segment. So they buy the number online, they say, they configure themselves in like a 5-click self-service onboarding funnel, and then they activate, and then the number is live in 3 seconds. So we have no touch point with the end customer, but also we don't have to do anything in the back end. And that makes the business case quite nice, and it's a way to differentiate in the market also. So there are some other things that's different from the SME perspective, because many ask me, okay, but what's really different from consumer? Because we have been able to actually have a digital experience for the consumer segment already. And one thing is that obviously it's more complexity, and complexity is not always equal to self-service, because then it needs to be really simple. And one thing is because it adds a complexity in terms of number of hierarchies. Obviously you have the end user and the employee at the company, and then you have the administrator and the owner of the company that also need to have their views and rules. And then you have the MVNO or service provider operator in general that also need to have then administrative views of then both the end user subscription and the company, and different types of rules and triggers dependent on what sales cycle they're in, or if they have contracts that needs to be adapted and also included in the self-service for them to use in the end. The other part is that the traditional sales for SME is not only mobile. If you're gonna have a full offering for the SME, you also need to have some other standard services like a PBX, a fixed number in most markets. And that also needs to be included in the customer journeys and in the administrative portals, etc. IoT we see now also is getting more and more common, where I think it's much more mature in the enterprise market, because that's the IoT has been for a while, but a lot of SME customers also now do need IoT to serve their end clients. and do want that as a part of the offering, and also needs to be included in the full portals and self-service and online sales and everything like that. One thing where the SME are similar to large enterprises, though, is that they do really appreciate the personal contact. They want to be treated as a large enterprise in terms of the relationship with the operator. And I think this is one thing that we then could use our brand for, where we have promised to have below 1 minute in response time between like 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. And have delivered the last 7 years. And I think this is where to have an automated solution is quite powerful, because we could never afford this if we had a lot of support errands. But if no one more or less contacts us, compared to how often you contact Spotify or Netflix, then this is a great USP in the market, because no one is using it. But it requires a really, really seamless experience for them to actually prefer to do it self-service and not to be forced to. We did a survey in 2021 where we interviewed 200 telco executives and over 1,000 end users, including here in the UK. And one interesting learning was that the MNOs thought the customers are loyal to their brands, but the end users said more or less, well, I'm happy, but if something else comes up, I would love to try and move to it. And I think this is just one example where I believe the time is now, where it's a lot of changes happening in most markets and in telecoms also, and it will be someone utilizing on this opportunity. It can be similar to fintech, where there's a lot of other players entering the market, taking different parts of the value chain. The hyperscalers could be one, it could be Facebook and Google taking parts of the B2B side, but it can also be different types of traditional telco players just being more in forefront of driving customer value, because that's where the winner's gonna be. So to finish off, I think there's a lot of things happening. I think the SME obviously is one of unserved segments that the digital era enables to focus on. The only thing we know is that the future will always change. And I think my main learnings is to do focus on stuff that everyone else is not. Focus on the end customer value and use technology to enable that in the end. And last but not least, someone will do stuff now. So it's not, no, I think it's no longer the opportunity to sit and, now I lose the English word for it, protect or whatever. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I have any questions? Aha, Ray. Is Rob up there with the microphone? I'm not sure. Yes. He's coming your way, Ray.
Ray Lemaitre from Telecom TV. Are you planning to take this model to other markets around Europe? And can you just say how successful you've been in the SME market in the Nordics? You know, what kind of market share have you taken?
Yeah. So basically we're going internationally now, not with our MVNO though, but with the technology to enable others. So the strategy is more, we think others have the muscles and the knowledge of how those markets looks like, and to enable them with a tech and experience instead. I think our own MVNO has been, in our case, it's small. It has like, what is it, like 1% market share or something. But we have also spent zero money on marketing. So the thousands of customers we have really only been onboarded by word of mouth.
Did you just say zero money marketing?
Yeah, we talk about in total over 5 years' time, maybe 100,000 euros or something. So it's very, very tiny.
Okay.
So I think we have about 16,000 businesses about now, which I'm quite happy with in terms of only no salesperson, no partners, and only online. But then obviously we have other partners that we then serve with the technology that have their customer bases that are onboarded, and we have both launched or migrated over to our tech then.
Any particular markets you're targeting?
So now we're targeting the Netherlands, Germany, UK, and the US mainly.
Bit lacking in ambition.
We had a focus, okay, now we're going into Netherlands, but now the inbound leads has been, now it's been more focused on, okay, people are saying we're gonna launch B2B now. And it's not that many B2B solutions out there. So we're staffing up quite rapidly to be able to just deliver. We have 11 more brands that's gonna launch this year that we signed and gonna implement. So it's going quite fast.
Has anybody else got a question for Martina? Okay, may I ask one, please?
Yes.
I want to know, how come you knew how to make people happy from the word go? Was it just you worked on the basis of stuff you didn't like?
Sorry, again?
Well, you said you'd won the happiness score.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering how you figured out what the criteria should be.
I think first of all, it's quite an easy target because the SME market is very unhappy and they used to have a lot of problems all the time. So I think just the basic was just to reduce the number of problems and they were happy. I think that's one. And then the second one, I think in terms of success, is not only technology and the offering, it's also the culture. And I think we have done a good job in mirroring that we do care about the customers and that they feel that in the end, and are since we have so few contacts, when they are in contact with us, we can give them a lot of love and not to have a stressed relationship just to solve the errand. And I think that's has been one of the things that worked for us at least.
Martina, thank you. I thought it was really interesting.
Thank you.
Something a bit different, huh?